The idea of sitting down in front of a blank page or a blank screen and creating something out of nothing used to petrify me. In fact, the blank page and creative block are almost synonymous for me, as they always seem to go hand in hand. But luckily that's not the only way to be creative, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. Until fairly recently, I didn't consider myself creative, let alone a creative, someone who defines themselves as a maker of things. I definitely wasn't artistic as a kid. In fact, I remember staring in fascination and no small amount of envy as my classmates would take scraps of paper, ribbons, colored pencils, whatever we were given, and just make pretty things. It felt like they had this magical ability to channel creativity and convert bits of stationery into art. I sure as hell couldn't do that. I would slap together some messy, ugly thing, get frustrated, and just play Snake on my Nokia phone for the rest of class. This was the 90s, and yeah, I'm getting on a bit. My wife also has this ability. We decided to write down our life goals for this coming year. After 2020, some kind of structure seemed like a good idea. So I created a checklist with 5 bullet points. Done. This is what my wife made. Some people just can't help but be creative. I have never been one of those people. In my teens, when I became interested in photography, I had to convince myself that it was more technology than art, and so creativity wouldn't play as big a part. It wouldn't matter so much, and that gave me a chance of being okay at it. And this frame of mind massively influenced my first decade in photography. I read my camera manual back to front, and I'd spend hours just trying out different settings to understand how everything affected everything else: aperture, ISO, shutter speed, focal length. I was determined that my technical understanding would, I guess, make up for my lack of artistic talent. It came down to this, really. I didn't feel I could just sit down and come up with my own ideas. That thought petrified me, like I said, because I wasn't a creative person. So to get around this, I would analyze all the photos I loved, a bit like a chess player memorizes positions. I have hundreds, maybe thousands of screenshots with scribbles all over them. I'd break down the lighting and poses in every photo in this really systematic way, and often I'd also try and recreate the images myself if I could, to see how close I could get to the original. I did this for years. I still do this. But one day something unexpected happened. This systematic, analytical approach to photography I was taking somehow freed this inner creativity I had no idea existed. And rather than simply recreating other people's work, I started changing little things, adding in my own ideas, often adding in so many that it stopped looking anything like the source material. It just became my own original work. And these days, I lean heavily into this process. In fact, on my last photo shoot, I hit a creative block. Things were not going well, and it was stressing me out. So I looked at my shot list and picked out a screenshot from the film 300, this one. It was an image I'd analyzed a few years ago, and I really wanted to try and recreate it. So that's what we did. We spent 10 minutes setting up the shot and eventually created this image. Now, pulling off that shot on the day gave me a confidence boost. My stress totally disappeared and I started feeling creative again. So we started playing around with the light, props, poses, and eventually created a bunch of other photos. And what happened on that photo shoot is essentially a microcosm of, I think, what happened on my photographic journey as a whole. I'd just been creatively blocked by fear my entire life, probably since that formative experience as a kid when I'd convinced myself that some people can make pretty things and others can't. And I took that as a universal truth. I never allowed myself the opportunity to really create, to be creative. I just thought I would fail. Yet somehow, by forging this analytical, anti-creative path through photography, I'd ended up unlocking my own creative block. I'd found a way around the fear. I connected the technical side with the artistic side without even realizing, and that itself gave me the confidence to be creative. It completely changed my relationship with creativity. Before that, I'd fetishized creativity, thinking of it as a gift that was granted to some lucky people, but not to others, definitely not to me. Yet, by internalizing the technical side of photography, I'd removed the main barrier to creativity, which was fear. And when working with my equipment became second nature, when it stopped occupying much space in my mind, that cleared the way for creativity to slowly creep in and fill that space. This has been my experience. I'm not saying it's the best way to learn photography. Everyone is different. But I do see many photographers who barely know how to use their camera, and then they try to work with multiple lights or multiple models. That's suddenly a lot of moving pieces to manage, and it gets stressful. I'm not creative when I'm stressed, and I think that's a pretty common problem. The stress hormone cortisol is the absolute enemy of creativity. But if you can get familiar enough with the technical aspects of photography, not just your camera, but your lenses, your lights, your lighting setup, and I mean really familiar, being able to change your settings on your camera without looking at it, being able to break down the lighting in someone else's image in just a couple of seconds. If you can internalize all this stuff like you've done, say, with driving. I mean, you don't look down at your feet every time you want to brake or accelerate. At least I hope you don't. You know where the pedals are, and this frees you from focusing on the car to focusing on the driving. The car is just a tool. I don't see photography as any different conceptually. The tools you use to take a photo shouldn't occupy too much space in your mind. Fiddling with dials and buttons all the time requires you to use the left side of your brain, your analytical, problem-solving brain. If you want to stay in that creative mindset, you need to get to the point where you can use all those tools unconsciously without thinking. And once you get to that stage, that's when you can truly be in the moment when you're creating, using the right side of your brain to get into that elusive flow state.